So I am Marty Peter Sparling and president of the Board of Trustees for People's Church for this year 2022 to 2023, and I call the annual meeting to order. We have Donna McClurkin as secretary, keeping notes. Barb Davis is here as parliamentarian, and we have Rick Johnson and Matt Johnson somewhere as our tellers in the room. And we also have Brian Lewis and Reverend Rachel in the back. They're our Zoom tellers. So this meeting is now available via Zoom as well as in person, thanks to our new bylaws. Do we have to count members?
Rick should know.
Do we know how many members are present? 57. 61?
So we're up to 61?
61. We'll check the voting ballot numbers. 61.
And then ask the Zoom tellers how many are on Zoom.
Zoom tellers, do you have a number? Ten members on Zoom. Okay, thank you. So as I said, we have tellers, and so if anyone would care to speak, we have microphones available, and the tellers will be helping to pass around microphones, and then our Zoom tellers will be watching for messages and waving at me if there's anything that needs to be shared. Okay. And so the votes we take today will not be the final votes. It will be for any changes or adjustments. The final ballot will be sent out after today, and then we have, I believe, until June 5th to actually send in your vote. So any votes done today will be to determine the final ballot, and that will be sent to all members. So if you could look at your agenda, it should be in your packet. Page 3, a list of 11 items. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda for today? Okay. Hearing none, then the agenda is approved. And so now the minutes from last year's meeting unfortunately did not get into your packet. They are up on the screen. I apologize if that's a little small. They were available on the website before today, so hopefully you had a chance to look at those. So any adjustments or changes to the minutes from last year's meeting, dated May 22nd, 2022? Yes, Adam, do you want to come up and, so do you have an adjustment to the minutes?
Adjustment, for example, to about buildings that the finance should be improved, about increase the salary for the people who are working like administration,
Okay.
as barrister and everything who working increase their salary.
Thank you, Adam. Can you hold on that? This is really just to talk about the minutes from last year, and then we'll move on to other things later, okay? Thank you. So any changes to last year's minutes or corrections to last year's minutes? Okay, so hearing none, the minutes from last May 22nd, 2022 are approved. So also in your packet are the report for me as the president of the board. Just a few quick notes if you weren't able to read it. It was a lot of getting back to normal. We had been meeting virtually for the first 2 years that I served on the board because of the pandemic, and we finally started meeting in person again. And after a while, we were able to remove our masks and actually see each other's faces again. We worked on policies, we worked on safety and security, a lot of kind of just routine board stuff. So when I started writing it, I thought it was going to be a very boring report, but we did do some stuff, and we are looking at salaries. As Don pointed out, we do have goals of raising those. We did pass a policy to wage everyone to at least a living wage last year, so that took effect this year. We raised the money to support that. We're looking at updating our lovely piano, which is 100 years old and needing some repairs that are unfortunately a bit too expensive to make it worthwhile. So we're looking out for a new piano, and we've approved some funds in case one becomes available. We're looking, as I said, into safety. Gordon Bowler has created a preparedness committee that is looking at ways to make the church safer. And we've celebrated Alan Hunt's term as treasurer, and he's decided to take a retirement after many years of saying so. So thank you to Alan. Are there any other reports? Anyone that would like to give an update in person? All the reports were in from board and buildings and grounds and RE. They should all be in your packet. We're going to wait for just reports. Okay, Adam? They should be available in the packets and on the website for you to read. Otherwise, we'll have the nominating committee share their report on nominations for the Board of Trustees.
I don't remember.
Is the chair of the nominating committee here? Maybe not. Yeah, you're on the agenda to share the nominating committee's choices. Is that all right? You don't have to read the whole report. It's just this, you're presenting the slate of nominees. Is that okay?
Up at the front.
Yeah. There's one up by our chalices.
Remember that next year.
I didn't realize I was going to be called on. The nominating committee for 22-23. What's that? Get closer? Okay. It consisted of myself, Rachel Bear, Sandy Steele, Lois Leffler, Steve Kavanaugh, and Karen Fidel as the board appointed. We developed a slate of candidates for the People's Board of Trustees and for the nominating committee. The committee followed the procedures as outlined in the church bylaws, and the candidates were presented to the congregation through the published biographies. I want to thank Rachel for documenting our process. I think we leave that in good hands for the next committee. Our board nominees are Laura Baltman, Donna Kay, and Cindy Petrus. Are they here? Should we have them stand up? Oh, okay. Our nominating committee nominees are Robert Friedel and Lori Roop. And Myself and Karen Friedel have completed our nominating committee service. I'd also like to mention that the committee had suggested that we set up an online directory with our pictures on it so that it's easier for us to identify church members and make it easier to nominate people. It was a little bit of a struggle since we're coming out of the pandemic to know who's who. Appreciate the opportunity to serve the People's Church and our fellow members. That's my report. Thank you.
So our bylaws have nomination by petition, and so no additional nominations can be made at this time. So all those in favor of including the entire slate on the ballot for Board of Trustees, including Laura Boltman, Donna Kay, and Cindy Pietras, please raise your voting card. And keep them up high for our tellers, please.
People assume they can be doing their count.
The people on Zoom, yes, sorry, those in Zoom, please raise your hands. It looks like we do have the tellers counting people. Do we have a number? 7 on Zoom.
Heard the 8, as she was saying 7. 8.
And in the Commons? 56. All right, please put your cards down. And those who are opposed? Do I ask them to abstain? No. Okay, and on Zoom, any opposed? 0 opposed. Okay. So Laura Boltman, Donna Kay, and Cindy Pietras will be welcomed onto the board for this coming year. And so the slate for the nominating committee has also been presented. Our bylaws, again, do not allow for any additions at this time. So those in favor of including the entire slate for the nominating committee, including Bob Friedel and Lori Roop, please raise your ballot cards at this time. And those on Zoom as well, either raise your hand or press the raise hand function. And our tellers will be counting you, so hold those high. So how many in favor on Zoom? 8. And in the Commons? 56. And any, oh yes, so put your cards down. And now any opposed to the nominating slate? I see none in the Commons. Any opposed on Zoom? No. So the slate of the nominating committee are all approved to be included on the ballot. So that is Robert Friedel and Lori Roop.
Yay, thank you.
Okay. So yes, I apologize. These will be on the ballot, and we aren't officially voting everyone in. So now we will have a report on the state of the endowment funds. Alan, is that you, or do we have someone from the? Anyone from the Finance Committee? Apparently not. Sorry, I guess it's your one last act.
I don't necessarily have this in the right order because I didn't anticipate that part, but I'll try to do it all in one with a little preface. The preface is that we followed the usual procedures, which is invite those committees and those decision makers to submit their requests based upon last year and whatever they think is appropriate. This is developing the budget. We trimmed or adjusted as we felt necessary, and that credit there goes to Reverend Rachel, to the Finance Committee that worked on this, and to the Board of Trustees. And some of you know we had a budget briefing like we always do, and 25 or 30 people showed up, but there was not a single question. So I don't know if that's a rehearsal for today or not, but we'll find out. In terms of the results on stewardship, we have to report that we basically rose. I was planning to preface this with the bad news first, but we received 152 pledges this year for $294,000, which is up 10% over last year, and is the most we've ever raised in such a drive. So good news. Our average pledge for next year is $1,934. And we have, as of Friday, and of course we're still, clock is still ticking, we had 38 new pledgers for this year. Oh, yay! That's great. On the other side, 29 of us have not renewed pledges for next year. So if you're one of those, or if you know someone who is, get a hold of them and let them know that we need them. In addition, just to be complete, we have $20,000 still owing from those of us who are pledged this year and have not completed our pledge. And if you're in that position and don't know where you stand, please call the office and talk to Diana about your pledge. She can give you all the details, but no one else can, so that's kind of specific. Our investment, oh boy, I know it's in here somewhere. Page, oh, and the other one. Sorry, you got it handy? Okay, good, thank you, Rochelle. Two pieces of this. Where do we stand? We have about $450,000 in our various endowment funds. Last year was 100,000 more. So that tells you we had a bad year in investments, like probably all of you did. They're spread out. The reserve fund was 52,905. We took something out of that to cover our cash needs for the rest of this fiscal year. We have almost 200,000 in the Palmer Unrestricted Fund, which can be used for any purpose that the congregation approves, except supporting the budget, which is limited to 5% of the funds, and that has not been voted or approved for this year yet. We have 250,000 in the Perpetual Pledge Fund, which is where you put your money for the future, and there is a 5% payout each year. That's very important in terms of our support for growth and extra things. Then we have a social service fund, which is specifically devoted to supporting outreach activities from People's Church to the outside, not for church activities per se. And as that totals, as of, I think that was March 31st, 549,000. And you should know, according to the committee, that the distribution of those funds currently is 54% in stocks and equities, 35% in bonds, and 11% in cash equivalents. And the committee is Greg Feldmeyer, Jeff Vanderstraten, and Pat Van Slambrook, who was just up here. Okay, let me get back on track. I wanted to start with the bad news so I can finish on a high note. This budget, first of all, has a deficit, about $20,000, which we are not able to cover at this point. And worse, it includes a supplemental pledge drive for this next year. We need to raise about $40,000 in that device. And if you think that sounds impossible, I'll just tell you, we've done this twice. Once on a limited basis, just to the top 25 pledgers. That was this past year. We raised $32,000, and we did it in 2017-18 with a more serious budget problem, and we raised a little over $50,000. So I'm comfortable projecting that you and I can generate $40,000 to close this budget gap for this year. That's about 10% of our budget currently, as you probably know if you've looked at the numbers. In terms of impacts, we eliminated the RE assistant position, at least temporarily. Laura is leaving for a full-time job, and we grabbed that to make it essentially of some savings. The UUA denominational support, and I know this is close to some of your hearts, we cut that in half for next year. We've had 2 years at the level that they suggested, and we just can't afford it this next year. And the endowment fund transfers, which are the things that come off what I mentioned, are going to be down from $21,000 this year to $13,000 next year. Again, that represents the difficult year we've had with our stock holdings this year, and bond holdings too. It's the first year that I can remember where both stocks and bonds dropped. It's pretty unusual for Wall Street. Good news, we have at least a 5% raise for all our hourly employees. Some are more, which you can't see in the budget because we reconfigured some hours and negotiated with some of these people. But so we have at least a 5% raise, which is roughly the cost of living increase. So we're not falling behind. For our salaried people, we cut that in half to 2.5%. That includes Reverend Rachel, Diane Melvin, and Melissa. And we are still meeting the living wage standard, which was mentioned earlier, calculated by MIT, and as approved by the congregation last year at this meeting. So we are staying true to that, and everyone is being paid at least the living wage for Kalamazoo. That was where I was going to talk about stewardship. Okay, looking back, 3 years of COVID-19 have been very hard on this church. And just to illustrate that, our pledging units fell about 25%. That is, people who had been pledging and they have departed over this 3-year period. Now, you've heard about the gains. We're not quite back to where we were, but we're making good progress. The interesting thing about that is with a 25% charge or drop in pledging units, we only lost about $5,000 in pledge income. So you guys all pitched in to cover that and to keep us essentially fluent and solvent during this difficult time. We have, I should mention also the PPP. We received, as you know or remember, I hope, 2 grants which turned into grants. They started as loans of $40,000 each for 2 years ago and 1 year ago. And that's basically the $40,000 that we're going to try to raise with this supplemental drive. So we're going to ask you to pay that instead of the federal government this time because they aren't paying us anymore. So we will ask for a supplemental drive. It's currently scheduled probably for November. Might be a little later, I'm not sure, but it will be before tax time. And it will have a goal of $40,000 in additional revenue, in addition to what you've pledged so far. And we're sorry for that. But as I said, we have done this before and it's been successful. And we do have our endowment and reserve funds, as I mentioned, totaled over $550,000. That's the report. I will take any questions you have about the budget or any other financial items. Ahad.
Hi, I want to add something is very important about about that about when you go to home you pay the bill electricity and if you have a bill the bill you ask you about it who pays the bill use and that's your church to support the church about for good time and hard time and also about we need about a lot of donation to replace the piano and the increase the money for all employment and staff at Bible Church and we need support about could be possible to help them to be about every week we should about donate about at least $1,000 per week to Bible Church to make the place is beautiful and good standing for each services and staff member.
I think that's an appeal for more donations and supporting the church as we do. And as you know, Adham, we do collect every Sunday. That is almost the big money goes outside. We keep 2 or 3 of those a month and we put one outside. And so far, as I've heard in my tenure, people are delighted with that, both inside and outside, the givers and the church. Yes, certainly you'd have needs here, absolutely. And I don't know what the status of that is. Does anyone? Okay, we're short, very short on the piano fund, but. Okay, then let me just, because you mentioned the solar, Tom has done a study recently, check me, Tom, we have reduced our consumption of electricity by 40%. That's impressive. And by gas or of gas by 20%. So. Okay, different issue. All right. Questions, comments, problems? Okay, you're very welcome.
So all those in favor of adopting the budget as presented by Alan Hunt, please raise your voting cards at this time and hold them up high for our tellers. And those in Zoom as well, please raise your hand or hit the raise hand function. So how many on Zoom?
There are 8.
8 in favor and in the Commons, 56. And you may lower your voting cards. All those opposed, please raise your card. So I see none in the Commons. Any on Zoom?
There are 0.
Thank you, Brian.
One hasn't lowered their number, but if they voted earlier.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you.
All right. So the budget for 2023 will be included on the ballot as presented. So now we move on to any new business. Well, seeing none, we'll move on. So people have asked if they can vote here at the annual meeting. Melissa said she will get the link ready as soon as possible, so within a few minutes, there will be a link available. I guess I'm not entirely sure how that is available, if it'll just be on the website.
No, it's sent out in email.
Oh, sent an email, sorry. So you'll get an email very shortly, and we also will print out ballots. You can sign for a ballot and a return envelope in the foyer. And there's also a ballot box right there in the foyer as well, although that won't be available until the, because we don't have ballots right now, do we?
We can use the wooden boxes.
But they can vote now even?
When Melissa gets the ballots out there.
Okay, yeah, as soon as the ballots are available, I suppose you can start voting. Dom, did you have a question?
Start the voting and the voting the ballot today?
If the ballots are available and ready to go, then you can start voting today. Otherwise, look for an email or request an envelope. Yes.
I know it's kind of stupid, but I don't understand what you're asking. We already voted on a bunch of things.
Right, so we're approving the ballot at this meeting, and now because we've changed our voting procedure so that those on Zoom and at home can also vote, then we are now going to be sending the ballot out via email or in paper form so that you can then fill it out at home and send it back. Do I have that right, Barb?
When we went to a hybrid meeting in the last bylaws, essentially we have gone to a vote of the entire membership. So a ballot goes out to all members. It either goes out electronically or it's available by mail. Well, people have said, well, we're here, can't we vote? Since we're here and we're available and we just voted, can't we just do our ballots now? So I asked Melissa, is that possible? And she said that if we had made any changes to the ballot, see, and right now we didn't really make any changes to the ballot. So she will go into her office and she will send out the emails, which is all set up and is automatic. And she will also print out ballots so that if you want to hang around maybe 10 minutes, there will be ballots and return envelopes available in the foyer if you want to vote today versus waiting and going home and doing your either electronic vote or waiting for the snail mail to deliver your ballot. Okay, and there is a locked wooden box out there that we may temporarily use as the ballot box so that we can collect the ballots. Okay, does that help? Does that explain things? Okay, so no more business.
I think that's all.
So as soon as we declare it adjourned, Melissa can go to work.
After you adjourn, can I make a little housekeeping announcement?
Yeah, yeah. Do you have some closing words for us, too? Or, no? It says it on my script. All right, so hopefully that is clear. If not, feel free to grab any of us afterwards. But we have reached the end of the meeting, and I call it to a close. We do have some closing words and announcements from Reverend Rachel as well.
So the announcement is just that if you're here in the room, it would be really helpful to all of us if you could move your chairs to the wall and stack them. And if you know how to put tables away, do that. If you know how to clean a dish. Well, Adham has volunteered, but it will take more than Adham to get them. So we want the floor clear so we can mop the floor this week. And now let's... The work of democracy can be a little messy, although this was pretty tidy today, and it can be a little complicated. But there's something beautiful about people coming together to be wiser together than they could be alone. So thank you for showing up and all the ways you show up. Let us all go in peace and go in love and clean up after ourselves.